Have you ever fallen asleep to the chaotic sounds of Peter Griffin crashing through a wall or Stewie plotting world domination? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, twisted, and surprisingly intricate world of Family Guy lore that's somehow become the perfect background noise for millions of viewers worldwide. From the hidden connections between episodes that span decades to the dark secrets lurking beneath Quahog's surface, this is your ultimate guide to the Family Guy universe that will either help you drift off to dreamland or keep you wide awake, questioning everything you thought you knew about America's most dysfunctional animated family. Family Guy has been on our screens for over 2 decades now, and what started as a simple animated sitcom has evolved into something far more complex and layered than most people realize. Tonight we're going to explore the deep lore, the recurring mysteries, the character backstories that only dedicated fans know about, and all the subtle details that make this show a fascinating rabbit hole to fall down as you're trying to fall asleep. Let's start with the Griffin family themselves, because there's so much more to these characters than meets the eye. Peter Griffin isn't just a bumbling father figure. His backstory reveals a man shaped by abandonment, neglect, and a desperate need for acceptance that manifests in increasingly destructive ways. We learn throughout the series that Peter was adopted, never knowing his real father until much later in the show's run. This abandonment issue explains so much about his behavior, his need to be the center of attention, and his often childlike approach to solving problems. But here's where it gets interesting for our sleepy exploration. Peter's job history reads like a fever dream. He's worked at a toy factory, been a fisherman, worked at a brewery, become a bodyguard, tried his hand at being a country music star, worked as a private investigator, and somehow ended up back at the brewery multiple times. Each job change represents a different phase of the show's evolution, and if you're watching chronologically as you fall asleep, you can actually track the show's tonal shifts through Peter's career moves. Lois Griffin presents an even more fascinating character study for our nighttime viewing. She comes from the wealthy Pewterschmidt family, which immediately sets up this class conflict that runs throughout the entire series. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, represents old money, conservative values, and everything that Peter both despises and desperately wants to be accepted by. Lois chose Peter over her privileged background, but this choice haunts their relationship in subtle ways that become more apparent when you're watching with sleepy, unfocused attention. The really interesting lore element here is how Lois's musical background keeps surfacing throughout the series. She's classically trained, she's performed professionally, and there are hints that she gave up a potentially successful career to become a housewife and mother. These musical moments in the show often serve as brief respites from the chaos, making them perfect for viewers who are using the show to wind down. Now let's talk about Meg, because her character arc is actually one of the most complex and disturbing elements of the Family Guy universe. What starts as typical teenage awkwardness evolves into something much darker. The family's treatment of Meg goes beyond normal sibling rivalry or parental frustration. It becomes a systematic emotional abuse that the show initially played for laughs, but gradually reveals as genuinely harmful. The lore around Meg includes several episodes that suggest she's actually the most mentally stable and capable member of the family, which makes her treatment even more tragic. She's shown to be intelligent, talented, and capable of genuine empathy, qualities that the rest of the family either ignores or actively punishes. For viewers drifting off to sleep, Meg's storylines often provide a strange sort of comfort because they're usually quieter and more introspective than the main family chaos. Chris Griffin's character development follows a different trajectory entirely. While he's often dismissed as the dumb kid, the show's lore reveals that Chris has artistic talent, musical ability, and emotional intelligence that surpasses most of his family members. His relationship with his father is complicated by Peter's own insecurities about masculinity and success. Chris represents the possibility of breaking the cycle of dysfunction, which gives his character an underlying hopefulness that works well for bedtime viewing. But let's dive into the real star of Family Guy's complex lore, Stewie Griffin. This character has undergone one of the most dramatic evolutionary arcs in television history. He started as a genuinely evil baby bent on world domination and matricide, but gradually transformed into a complex character dealing with identity, sexuality, and belonging. The show never explicitly addresses this transformation, which creates this fascinating ambiguity about whether Stewie actually changed or whether we're just seeing different aspects of his personality. The time travel episodes featuring Stewie create some of the most intricate lore in the entire series. His future selves, his various timelines, and his technological capabilities suggest a level of intelligence and capability that extends far beyond what we see in regular episodes. These time travel storylines often involve quieter, more contemplative moments that are perfect for viewers who are trying to relax. Stewie's relationship with Brian creates another layer of lore that's perfect for our sleepy exploration. Their friendship transcends the typical pet-owner relationship and becomes something closer to intellectual partnership. They travel together, solve problems together, and engage in philosophical discussions that often serve as the show's more thoughtful moments. Their dynamic provides a consistent emotional anchor throughout the series' more chaotic elements. Speaking of Brian, his character lore is incredibly rich and often overlooked. He's not just a talking dog, he's a failed writer, a recovering alcoholic, a liberal intellectual, and someone struggling with depression and self-worth issues. His various romantic relationships throughout the series reveal someone desperately seeking validation and connection. His death and resurrection in later seasons created one of the most emotionally impactful storylines in the show's history, demonstrating how attached viewers had become to his character. The setting of Quahog itself deserves exploration in our lore deep dive. This fictional Rhode Island town has its own mythology, complete with local celebrities, recurring businesses, and a distinct culture. The Drunken Clam serves as a central gathering place where much of the show's male bonding and philosophical discussions occur. Mort Goldman's pharmacy, the local news station, and various other businesses create a sense of continuity and community that grounds the more absurd elements of the show. Cleveland's departure and return to the series creates interesting lore implications. His time in Virginia with his own spin-off show exists in the same universe, and references to his experiences there occasionally surface in Family Guy episodes. This interconnected universe concept adds depth for viewers who are familiar with both shows. Quagmire's character provides some of the darkest lore in the entire series. While often played for laughs, his behavior patterns suggest serious psychological issues and criminal tendencies. The show occasionally hints at a more complex backstory involving his father's gender transition, his military service, and his dysfunctional relationship patterns. These darker elements create an interesting contrast with his seemingly cheerful demeanor. Joe Swanson's backstory as a disabled police officer adds another layer of complexity to the Quahog community. His accident, his marriage to Bonnie, and his struggle to maintain his sense of purpose and masculinity after becoming paralyzed provide some of the show's more serious emotional content. His friendship with Peter, Cleveland, and Quagmire often explores themes of loyalty, acceptance, and adaptation that work well for contemplative viewing. The show's cutaway gags, while seemingly random, actually create their own form of lore through recurring characters and situations. Conway Twitty appearances, the various historical figures Peter claims to have interacted with, and the recurring joke characters all contribute to the show's internal mythology. These cutaways often provide brief mental breaks that can be soothing for viewers trying to wind down. Family Guy's approach to continuity is deliberately loose, which actually makes it perfect for casual viewing. Unlike serialized dramas that require intense attention to plot details, Family Guy episodes can be enjoyed independently while still rewarding longtime viewers with references and callbacks. This makes it ideal for background viewing or for times when you're not paying complete attention. The show's musical numbers deserve special mention in our lore exploration. From Conway Twitty performances to elaborate Broadway-style productions, these musical interludes often serve as the show's most memorable and emotionally resonant moments. They break up the rapid-fire joke delivery and provide opportunities for character development and emotional expression. The various holiday episodes throughout the series create their own seasonal lore. Christmas episodes often explore themes of family, tradition, and redemption. Halloween episodes venture into horror and supernatural territory. These special episodes often feature higher production values and more elaborate storytelling that reward dedicated viewing. The show's treatment of religion, politics, and social issues creates ongoing lore threads that reflect changing social attitudes over the show's long run. Early episodes approach these topics differently than later ones, creating an interesting timeline of cultural evolution that can be tracked through the series' progression. Guest appearances and celebrity encounters in Family Guy often become part of the show's lore through recurring references and callbacks. These celebrity interactions sometimes extend beyond single episodes, creating ongoing relationships and references that reward longtime viewers. The various alternate reality and parallel universe episodes explore different versions of the Griffin family and Quahog community. These episodes often reveal character depths and relationship dynamics that aren't apparent in regular episodes. They also provide opportunities to explore what-if scenarios that add complexity to our understanding of the main characters. Family Guy's animation style evolution tells its own story about the show's development and budget changes over time. Early episodes have a distinctly different look and feel compared to more recent ones. This visual evolution creates a subtle timeline that longtime viewers can use to place episodes chronologically, even without checking air dates. The show's relationship with Fox Network, including its cancellation and resurrection, becomes part of its own metalore. Episodes that reference these real-world events blur the line between fiction and reality in ways that add extra layers for dedicated fans to discover and contemplate. As we wind down our exploration of Family Guy's rich lore landscape, it's worth noting that this depth and complexity is part of what makes the show so suitable for repeated viewing and background watching. There's always another layer to discover, another connection to make, another character detail to notice. Whether you're actively watching or letting it play, while you drift off to sleep, Family Guy's universe provides a consistent, familiar, and surprisingly deep world to explore. The beauty of Family Guy lore for bedtime viewing lies in its perfect balance of familiarity and discovery. You can watch episodes you've seen dozens of times and still notice new details, catch references you missed before, or simply let the familiar voices and situations wash over you as you relax. The show's episodic nature means you won't lose important plot threads if you fall asleep mid-episode, but its rich lore rewards those moments when you find yourself unexpectedly engaged and alert. Sweet dreams, and remember that somewhere in Quahog, Peter Griffin is probably about to do something that will somehow make perfect sense within the wonderfully chaotic universe that has been entertaining us for over 2 decades. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed scrolling through endless videos trying to find something that'll help you drift off to sleep? Most people go for rain sounds or meditation videos, but there's this weird corner of the internet that's discovered something completely unexpected: Family Guy lore videos. And honestly, it makes perfect sense once you think about it. Picture this: Peter Griffin's bumbling voice rambling about some ridiculous backstory while you slowly fade into dreamland. It's like having that one friend who tells really long, meandering stories that somehow become the perfect background noise for sleep. But here's the thing: Family Guy isn't just random jokes and cutaway gags. There's actually this incredibly deep, twisted universe hiding beneath all the chaos, and when you start exploring it at bedtime, something magical happens. Tonight, we're diving into the strangest, most soothing rabbit hole on YouTube. We're talking about Family Guy lore that's specifically designed to help you sleep. And trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll understand why millions of people are choosing Stewie's time travel adventures over counting sheep. Let's start with why this works so well. Your brain needs something engaging enough to distract from racing thoughts, but not so stimulating that it keeps you awake. Family Guy lore hits this sweet spot perfectly. The familiar voices create a sense of comfort, like having old friends nearby. The storylines are complex enough to occupy your mind, but delivered in that laid-back, conversational tone that naturally slows your heart rate. The beauty of Family Guy as sleep content lies in its structure. Unlike other shows that build tension toward climactic moments, Family Guy operates on this weird, episodic flow where nothing is too serious or urgent. Even when Peter is destroying the town or Stewie is plotting world domination, there's this underlying absurdity that signals to your brain that everything is okay. It's chaos, but comfortable chaos. One of the most popular sleep topics is Stewie's time travel timeline. Now, if you've watched the show casually, you might think Stewie's time adventures are just random episodes. But when you dig deeper, there's this incredibly complex web of cause and effect that spans decades. Stewie has literally shaped the Griffin family history in ways most viewers never realize. Think about it. In one timeline, Stewie prevents his own birth, which creates this paradox where he exists but shouldn't. In another, he saves his father's life, completely altering the family dynamic. These aren't just throwaway episodes. They're building blocks of an intricate multiverse where every action ripples through time. And when someone narrates this in a gentle, sleepy voice while you're tucked in bed, it becomes this dreamy exploration of cause and effect that naturally leads your mind into sleep. The time travel lore gets even more interesting when you consider Stewie's relationship with Brian. Their adventures through different eras reveal hidden layers of both characters. Brian isn't just the family dog who talks. He's this tortured intellectual who's lived through multiple timelines, sometimes remembering previous versions of events, sometimes completely oblivious. The complexity of their friendship across different realities becomes this beautiful, melancholy meditation on friendship and loyalty. What makes this perfect for sleep is how these time travel stories often end with everything returning to normal, or at least a version of normal. There's no real stakes because the show's format demands that the status quo be maintained. Your subconscious picks up on this pattern and relaxes, knowing that no matter how wild the adventure gets, the Griffin family will be okay by morning. Another incredibly soothing topic is the hidden depth of Peter Griffin's character. On the surface, he's just this obnoxious, immature father figure. But when you start examining his backstory, there's surprising emotional complexity. Peter's relationship with his own father, Francis, reveals layers of abandonment issues and the desperate need for approval that drives much of his behavior. The Catholic guilt that shapes Peter's worldview, his struggles with identity, his genuine love for his family despite constantly endangering them, all of this creates this rich psychological portrait. When narrated as bedtime content, Peter's flaws become almost endearing. He's not a bad person, he's just deeply human in the most ridiculous possible way. The show has quietly built this mythology around Peter's various jobs and failures. From working at the brewery to his brief stint as a country music star, each career represents a different aspect of the American dream gone wrong. But instead of being depressing, it's oddly comforting. Peter always bounces back, always finds something new to be enthusiastic about. His resilience becomes this gentle reminder that failure isn't permanent, that there's always another chance to mess things up in new and interesting ways. Lois Griffin's background provides another rich vein of sleep-friendly lore. Her wealthy upbringing, her musical talents, her complicated relationship with her parents, all of this creates this fascinating contrast with her current life. She chose chaos over comfort, love over luxury. When explored in that drowsy, contemplative tone that characterizes good sleep content, Lois becomes this complex figure who represents the compromises we all make for love. The show has revealed that Lois has this incredibly patient, almost saint-like quality that allows her to tolerate Peter's behavior. But occasionally, we see cracks in this facade, moments where her true feelings break through. These glimpses of Lois's inner life become fascinating character studies when presented as gentle bedtime analysis. Meg Griffin represents something even more interesting in the show's mythology. She's the perpetual outsider, the family member who never quite fits in. But when you examine her character closely, she's often the most sensible person in the room. Her isolation isn't really about her being unlikable. It's about her being different, more grounded than the rest of her chaotic family. The psychological dynamics of how the Griffin family treats Meg reveal uncomfortable truths about family structures and social hierarchies. But when explored as sleep content, these observations become philosophical musings rather than harsh critiques. Meg's resilience in the face of constant rejection becomes almost inspiring, a quiet testament to the strength of people who don't fit conventional molds. Chris Griffin's journey through adolescence provides another layer of gentle complexity. His artistic talents, his kind heart, his struggles with self-image, all of this unfolds against the backdrop of typical teenage challenges amplified by his family's dysfunction. Chris represents hope in the Griffin universe, the possibility that the next generation might break free from destructive patterns. The show has developed this subtle running theme about Chris's potential. He's genuinely talented, genuinely caring, but constantly undermined by his environment. When narrated as bedtime content, Chris's story becomes this quiet meditation on nurture versus nature, on how children can maintain their essential goodness despite chaotic circumstances. Brian Griffin deserves special attention because he's arguably the most complex character in the entire series. He's an intellectual trapped in a dog's body, an artist struggling with mediocrity, a liberal idealist living in a conservative household. His pretensions and failures make him simultaneously the most relatable and most frustrating character. Brian's writing career, his romantic relationships, his drinking problem, his philosophical debates with Stewie, all of this creates this rich tapestry of middle-aged disappointment wrapped in surreal comedy. When presented as sleep content, Brian's struggles become universal human experiences filtered through the lens of absurdity. The relationship between Brian and Stewie forms the emotional core of many episodes, and their dynamic has evolved significantly over the show's long run. Early episodes portrayed them as adversaries, but they've developed into this unusual friendship between two intellectuals who understand each other's isolation within the Griffin household. Their conversations, whether they're traveling through time or just sitting in the living room, often touch on profound themes of mortality, purpose, and connection. When these moments are compiled and narrated as bedtime content, they become these surprisingly deep philosophical discussions that naturally lead the mind toward contemplative rest. The supporting characters in Family Guy have developed their own rich backstories that provide endless material for sleep-friendly content. Glenn Quagmire, despite his obvious character flaws, has this complex history as a pilot and adventurer. His relationship with his father, his military service, his various romantic entanglements, all of this creates this surprisingly detailed character study. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the show created interesting continuity questions that lore enthusiasts love to explore. The dynamics of the friend group, how relationships change over time, how people grow apart and come back together, these themes resonate on a deeper level when explored in that gentle, bedtime storytelling style. Joe Swanson's backstory as a police officer and his adjustment to life in a wheelchair provides material for surprisingly touching character exploration. His determination, his relationship with his family, his role as the moral center of Peter's friend group, all of this unfolds into rich character development that works beautifully as sleep content. The world building in Family Guy extends beyond the main characters to include the town of Quahog itself, the recurring locations, the background characters who appear across multiple episodes, the local politics and social dynamics. All of this creates a lived-in universe that feels surprisingly real despite its cartoon absurdity. The show has developed this consistent internal logic about how Quahog operates, from the local government to the business community to the social hierarchies. When explored as lore content, these details create this comforting sense of a complete world where everything has its place, even if that place is completely ridiculous. Family Guy's relationship with pop culture provides another fascinating avenue for sleep-friendly exploration. The show's countless references and parodies create this massive web of connections to movies, TV shows, music, and historical events. Tracing these references becomes like a gentle intellectual exercise that occupies the mind without overstimulating it. The cultural commentary embedded in these references often reveals surprising insight about American society, entertainment, and human nature. When presented as bedtime analysis, these observations become thoughtful cultural criticism delivered in the most relaxed possible format. The show's approach to continuity creates interesting puzzles for lore enthusiasts. Some episodes clearly exist in the same universe, building on previous events and character development. Others seem to exist in isolation, resetting everything back to a baseline. Understanding which episodes connect and which stand alone becomes this gentle mental exercise, perfect for bedtime. This flexible approach to continuity actually enhances the show's value as sleep content. Unlike serialized dramas where missing details might leave you confused, Family Guy's episodic nature means you can drift in and out of consciousness without losing the thread of what's happening. The animation style and visual, Storytelling and Family Guy contribute to its effectiveness as sleep content. The character designs are simple and comforting. The color palette is warm and familiar, and the pacing of visual jokes follows predictable patterns. Your brain learns to anticipate the rhythm of the show, which naturally promotes relaxation. The voice acting deserves special mention because the performers have developed these characters over decades. The familiarity of these voices creates an immediate sense of comfort and security. Seth MacFarlane's multiple character voices, Alex Borstein as Lois, Mila Kunis as Meg, each voice becomes like a comfortable presence in your bedroom. The musical elements in Family Guy add another layer of sleep-friendly content. The show frequently features elaborate musical numbers that range from Broadway-style productions to simple character songs. These musical interludes often reveal character depths and emotions that regular dialogue might not capture. When compiled as sleep content, these musical moments become like gentle lullabies that showcase different aspects of the characters' personalities. Conway's witty performances, Stewie's show tunes, Peter's various musical adventures, all of this creates a diverse soundtrack for drifting off to sleep. The show's exploration of family dynamics provides universal themes that resonate regardless of the absurd context. The Griffin family, despite their dysfunction, genuinely cares about each other. Their conflicts and reconciliations follow familiar patterns that most viewers can relate to from their own family experiences. When examined as bedtime content, these family relationships become comforting reminders of the complexity and resilience of human connections. Even when Peter does something incredibly selfish or Stewie plots against his mother, the underlying love and loyalty always reassert themselves. The meta-humor in Family Guy creates another interesting layer for lore exploration. The show frequently acknowledges its own existence as a television program, breaking the fourth wall and commenting on its own production. These moments create this playful relationship between the show and its audience that enhances its value as comfort viewing. Understanding the real-world context behind certain episodes and jokes adds depth to the viewing experience without requiring intense concentration. The show's commentary on television, animation, and entertainment industry becomes gentle insider knowledge that enhances appreciation without demanding active analysis. The evolution of Family Guy over its many seasons provides rich material for comparative analysis. Early episodes had different character dynamics, different humor styles, and different production values. Tracing how the show has changed and developed becomes like following the growth of old friends. This long-term perspective on the series creates a sense of history and continuity that enhances its comfort value. You're not just watching random episodes. You're participating in this ongoing story that has unfolded over decades of real time. The fan community around Family Guy has developed its own theories and interpretations that add layers of meaning to seemingly simple episodes. These fan theories become part of the show's extended lore, creating additional content for exploration and discussion. When presented as bedtime content, these fan interpretations and theories become like bedtime stories shared among friends. They're speculative and playful rather than definitive, which makes them perfect for that drowsy state between wakefulness and sleep. The cultural impact of Family Guy extends beyond entertainment into social commentary and cultural criticism. The show has influenced animation, humor, and television production in measurable ways. Understanding this broader impact adds depth to individual episodes without requiring intense focus. This cultural context becomes another gentle layer of analysis that enhances the viewing experience. You're not just watching cartoons, you're experiencing a significant piece of contemporary American culture that has shaped entertainment and comedy. The merchandising and spin-off content around Family Guy creates additional universe expansion that lore enthusiasts love to explore. Video games, books, merchandise, and related media all contribute to the overall Griffin family mythology. These extensions of the core show become like supplementary reading that enhances understanding without being essential. They're bonus content that rewards dedicated fans while remaining accessible to casual viewers. So there you have it, the surprisingly deep and genuinely soothing world of Family Guy lore designed specifically for sleep. What started as a simple animated comedy has evolved into this rich, complex universe filled with character development, cultural commentary, and surprisingly profound themes about family, friendship, and human nature. The next time you're lying awake at 3 in the morning, scrolling through endless content options, remember that sometimes the most unexpected choices make the best bedtime companions. Peter Griffin's chaotic adventures and Stewie's time travel paradoxes might just be exactly what your brain needs to finally relax and drift off into peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the multiverse of Family Guy, everything always works out in the end, which is exactly the kind of reassurance we all need before closing our eyes for the night. What if I told you that the chaotic world of Quahog, Rhode Island, holds some of the most intricate storytelling mysteries hidden in plain sight? Tonight, we're diving deep into the sprawling universe of Family Guy, uncovering the hidden lore, forgotten storylines, and interconnected mysteries that make this animated sitcom far more complex than most people realize. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a gentle journey through the surprisingly rich mythology of the Griffin family and their bizarre little town. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Family Guy isn't just a collection of random cutaway gags and crude humor. Beneath all the chaos lies a carefully constructed universe with its own internal logic, recurring themes, and surprisingly deep character development that spans over 2 decades of storytelling. The show has created an entire ecosystem of characters, locations, and running narratives that interweave in ways that become apparent only when you step back and look at the bigger picture. Consider the Griffin family home itself. That modest 2-story house at 31 Spooner Street has witnessed countless adventures, but it's also a character in its own right. The house has its own history, its own secrets, and its own role in the family's story. We've seen glimpses of its past through various episodes, learning about previous owners and the strange events that have occurred within its walls. The basement has served as everything from a secret laboratory to a tornado shelter, while the attic holds forgotten memories and mysterious artifacts from the family's past. Peter Griffin, the family patriarch, represents something far more complex than the typical bumbling father figure. His character arc across hundreds of episodes reveals a man struggling with responsibility, identity, and his place in the world. His various jobs throughout the series aren't just random plot devices, they're explorations of the American, working-class experience. From his time at the toy factory, to his stint as a fisherman, from his brief career as a bodyguard, to his adventures in television production. Peter's employment history tells a story about economic uncertainty and the changing nature of work in modern America. The relationship between Peter and his father-in-law, Carter Pewterschmidt, opens up entire storylines about class, wealth, and family dynamics. Carter represents old money, established power, and traditional values, while Peter embodies working-class sensibilities and anti-establishment attitudes. Their ongoing conflict reflects broader cultural tensions about privilege, success, and what it means to be a man in contemporary society. The episodes focusing on their relationship often reveal deeper truths about both characters, showing us sides of Peter we rarely see, and humanizing Carter beyond his role as the wealthy antagonist. Lois Griffin's character development represents one of the show's most subtle long-term storytelling achievements. Initially presented as the patient, long-suffering wife, Lois has evolved into a complex character with her own ambitions, frustrations, and moral complexities. Her musical background, her brief career as a model, her struggles with motherhood, and her occasional dark turns all contribute to a character portrait that's far richer than it appears on the surface. The episodes that focus on Lois often explore themes of unfulfilled potential, the sacrifices women make for family, and the tension between personal desires and social expectations. The children of the Griffin family each represent different aspects of growing up in modern America. Meg's role as the family scapegoat initially seems cruel, but viewed through a longer lens, her character arc becomes a meditation on adolescence, social acceptance, and finding one's place in the world. Her various attempts to fit in, her brief moments of triumph, and her resilience in the face of constant rejection tell a story about teenage life that's both exaggerated and surprisingly authentic. The episodes where Meg finally stands up for herself or finds temporary happiness hit differently when you understand the full context of her journey. Chris Griffin's character explores themes of masculinity, creativity, and coming of age. His artistic talents, his awkward social interactions, and his relationship with his father create a narrative about growing up different in a world that values conformity. The episodes that focus on Chris often deal with sensitive topics like bullying, self-expression, and the pressure to live up to expectations. His friendship with Herbert, the elderly neighbor, creates uncomfortable comedy, but also touches on themes of loneliness and the generation gap. Then there's Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the entire series. His evolution from would-be world conqueror to sophisticated intellectual represents one of the most significant character developments in animated television. Stewie's relationship with Brian, his adventures through time and space, and his gradual coming to terms with his own identity create storylines that are simultaneously hilarious and surprisingly moving. The episodes that focus on Stewie often push the boundaries of what's possible in the Family Guy universe, introducing science fiction elements, philosophical discussions, and emotional depth that contrasts sharply with the show's typical tone. Brian Griffin serves as the show's moral center and intellectual conscience, but he's also deeply flawed in ways that make him more human than many actual human characters. His struggles with alcoholism, his pretentious intellectual posturing, his complicated romantic relationships, and his role as the family's voice of reason create a character who's simultaneously admirable and infuriating. The episodes that explore Brian's background, his relationship with his own identity as a talking dog, and his place in human society often serve as vehicles for social commentary and philosophical exploration. The town of Quahog itself is a character worthy of deep exploration. This fictional Rhode Island community has its own ecosystem of recurring characters, local institutions, and cultural traditions. The Drunken Clam serves as more than just Peter's favorite bar. It's a gathering place where working-class philosophy gets hashed out over beer and conversation. Jerome, the bartender, represents stability and wisdom in a world of chaos. The regular patrons each have their own stories and perspectives that contribute to the show's exploration of community and belonging. Quahog's local government, represented by Mayor Adam West, creates storylines that satirize American politics while also celebrating the absurdity of civic life. Mayor West's bizarre policies, his strange obsessions, and his genuine care for his constituents create a character who's simultaneously incompetent and oddly effective. The episodes dealing with local politics often reveal truths about democracy, leadership, and the relationship between citizens and their government. The show's approach to religion and spirituality, primarily explored through the Griffin family's relationship with their local church and various religious figures, creates ongoing narratives about faith, morality, and community. These storylines often challenge both religious orthodoxy and secular assumptions, creating space for nuanced discussions about belief and practice in modern American life. Family Guy's use of cutaway gags isn't just random humor, it's a storytelling technique that allows the show to explore ideas and scenarios that wouldn't fit into the main narrative. These brief vignettes often comment on historical events, pop culture phenomena, and social issues in ways that are both entertaining and insightful. The cumulative effect of hundreds of these cutaways creates a comprehensive commentary on American culture and society. The show's relationship with popular culture goes beyond simple parody. The various celebrity appearances, pop culture references, and media satires create a running commentary on fame, entertainment, and the role of media in modern life. Episodes that focus on Peter's brief brush with celebrity or Brian's attempts at literary fame explore themes about success, authenticity, and the price of public recognition. The recurring characters in Family Guy's universe each contribute to the show's exploration of different aspects of American life. Glenn Quagmire represents unchecked masculinity and sexual liberation, but episodes that delve deeper into his character reveal a more complex individual struggling with his own demons and desires. Cleveland Brown's friendship with Peter and his eventual move to his own spin-off series created storylines about race, friendship, and community that the show handled with surprising sensitivity. The show's treatment of disability, primarily through the character of Joe Swanson, creates ongoing narratives about resilience, adaptation, and the challenges faced by people with disabilities in American society. Joe's character development over the series shows him as a fully realized individual whose disability is just one aspect of his identity, not its defining characteristic. Family Guy's exploration of family dynamics extends beyond the immediate Griffin household to include the extended family members who appear throughout the series. Peter's relationship with his father Mickey, Lois's complex feelings about her parents, and the various relatives who drift in and out of episodes create a broader picture of how families function, dysfunction, and evolve over time. The show's handling of death and mortality, from the controversial killing and resurrection of Brian to the various deaths of minor characters throughout the series, creates ongoing meditations on loss, grief, and the meaning of life. These episodes often reveal the deep emotional connections between characters that might not be apparent in more comedic episodes. The science fiction elements that creep into Family Guy through Stewie's inventions and time travel adventures create opportunities for the show to explore philosophical questions about destiny, free will, and the nature of reality. The episodes dealing with alternate timelines and parallel universes suggest that the Family Guy universe is far more complex and interconnected than it initially appears. The show's treatment of education, primarily through the various school episodes and Chris and Meg's academic experiences, creates commentary on the American educational system, social hierarchies among young people, and the challenges of growing up in contemporary society. These storylines often reveal the ways that institutional structures both support and fail young people. Family Guy's exploration of work and economic life through Peter's various jobs and the family's financial struggles creates ongoing commentary about class, opportunity, and the American dream. The episodes that focus on economic hardship often reveal the ways that financial stress affects family relationships and individual well-being. The show's approach to mental health, explored through various characters' psychological struggles and Brian's role as unofficial family therapist, creates space for discussions about depression, anxiety, and the importance of mental health care. These storylines often handle serious topics with both humor and genuine sensitivity. As we wrap up this journey through the hidden depths of Family Guy's universe, it's worth noting that this exploration only scratches the surface of the rich storytelling possibilities contained within this seemingly simple animated comedy. The show's ability to balance crude humor with genuine emotional depth, social commentary with pure entertainment, and chaos with carefully constructed narrative arcs makes it a unique achievement in television comedy. The next time you watch an episode of Family Guy, try looking beyond the surface humor to see the deeper stories being told. Notice how character relationships evolve over time, how running gags develop new meanings in different contexts, and how the show uses its absurdist elements to explore very real human experiences and social issues. Sweet dreams, and remember that sometimes the most profound truths are hidden in the most unexpected places, even in the chaotic world of Quahog, Rhode Island. What if I told you that underneath all the random cutaway gags and crude humor, Family Guy has been building one of the most intricate and bizarre mythologies in television history? Tonight, we're diving deep into the hidden lore that connects everything from Stewie's time travel adventures to the cosmic horror lurking beneath Quahog's seemingly normal surface. Get comfortable, because this journey through the Griffin family's secret universe is going to be a wild ride that might just change how you see every episode forever. Let's start with something that seems innocent enough, but opens up an entire rabbit hole of implications. Have you ever noticed that Stewie Griffin isn't just a baby with advanced intelligence? He's actually a being that exists outside the normal flow of time itself. Throughout the series, we've seen him build time machines, travel to alternate dimensions, and even meet future versions of himself. But here's where it gets interesting. In several episodes, Stewie demonstrates knowledge of events that haven't happened yet, and sometimes he seems to be aware that he's in a television show. This isn't just random comedy writing. There's a consistent pattern that suggests Stewie might be some kind of temporal entity that chose to inhabit the body of a baby for reasons we're only beginning to understand. Think about it. He's built multiple time machines from scratch using household items. He's created clones, developed advanced weaponry, and even constructed interdimensional portals. No normal baby, no matter how intelligent, could accomplish these things without some kind of supernatural assistance or inherent cosmic power. The evidence becomes even more compelling when you consider his relationship with Brian. Unlike other family members who seem to understand Stewie only sporadically, Brian consistently communicates with him on an adult level. But Brian isn't just any dog. He's a talking dog who drives cars, writes novels, and has existential crises about the nature of reality. The fact that these two characters can communicate perfectly suggests they might both be operating on a different plane of existence than the rest of the family. Speaking of Brian, let's explore his own mysterious origins. He was found as a stray by the Griffin family, but his background remains largely unexplained. He drinks alcohol, smokes cigarettes, and engages in romantic relationships with humans. In several episodes, we've seen him question his own nature and struggle with the absurdity of being a talking dog in a world where most animals don't speak. This existential awareness might be the key to understanding his true nature. There's a theory that Brian represents a bridge between the normal world and the supernatural elements that permeate Quahog. He's intelligent enough to recognize the strangeness around him, but trapped in a form that prevents him from fully participating in human society. His conversations with Stewie often touch on philosophical and scientific concepts that suggest both characters are aware of deeper truths about their reality. Now let's talk about Peter Griffin himself, because beneath his bumbling exterior lies something far more complex. Peter has survived explosions, falls from incredible heights, and injuries that should have killed him dozens of times over. He's also demonstrated superhuman strength in various episodes, lifting cars and fighting characters with obvious supernatural abilities. But more importantly, Peter seems to be a nexus point for the weird events that happen in Quahog. Everywhere Peter goes, reality seems to bend slightly. Characters break into musical numbers for no reason. People appear and disappear without explanation. The laws of physics become suggestions rather than rules. It's as if Peter's presence weakens the barriers between the normal world and something much stranger. This could explain why the Griffin family attracts so many bizarre situations and supernatural encounters. Consider the episode where Peter gains psychic powers, or the times he's been visited by supernatural entities. These aren't isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern that suggests Peter might be unknowingly channeling some kind of cosmic energy. His simple-minded nature could be a protective mechanism that prevents him from fully comprehending his own power, because if Peter ever became truly aware of his abilities, the consequences could be catastrophic. Lois Griffin presents her own mysteries. On the surface, she's the long-suffering wife trying to keep her chaotic family together. But Lois has her own dark secrets and hidden depths. She comes from a wealthy family with connections that extend far beyond what we see on screen. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, isn't just rich. He's connected to military-industrial complexes and shadowy organizations that operate behind the scenes. Throughout the series, Lois has demonstrated skills and knowledge that suggest extensive training in areas most housewives would never encounter. She's fluent in multiple languages, skilled in combat, and has connections to criminal organizations. In several episodes, she's shown leading double lives that involve activities ranging from boxing to working with international intelligence agencies. These aren't random plot devices, but hints at a much larger story about who Lois really is and why she ended up with the Griffin family. There's also the question of how Lois manages to hold the family together despite the constant chaos. She seems to have an almost supernatural ability to adapt to whatever insane situation her family creates. Whether it's dealing with Stewie's death rays or Peter's latest scheme to destroy the neighborhood, Lois always finds a way to restore some semblance of normalcy. This suggests she might be operating with knowledge or abilities that go beyond what we see on the surface. The town of Quahog itself is a character in this strange mythology. It's supposedly a normal Rhode Island community, but the events that occur there on a regular basis defy all logic. The town has been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Its residents include everything from former Nazis to aliens to interdimensional beings. The mayor is a corrupt official who openly admits to criminal activities, yet somehow the town continues to function. What's really interesting is how quickly the residents of Quahog accept supernatural events. When a chicken fights Peter through half the town, destroying buildings and causing massive property damage, everyone just goes back to their normal lives afterward. When time travel events create paradoxes that should fundamentally alter reality, the town adapts without question. This suggests that Quahog exists in a state of flexible reality where the impossible becomes routine. The recurring locations in Quahog also hint at deeper mysteries. The Drunken Clam isn't just a bar. It's a place where characters regularly receive prophetic dreams and encounter supernatural entities. Quahog Elementary School has been the site of numerous reality-bending events. Even the Griffin house itself seems to exist partially outside normal space and time, with rooms that appear and disappear and basement areas that extend far beyond what the exterior structures should allow. Let's dive deeper into the show's treatment of death and resurrection, because Family Guy has a very loose relationship with mortality that suggests something profound about the nature of its reality. Characters die regularly, sometimes multiple times in the same episode, only to return without explanation. Brian has died and been brought back to life. Kenny McCormick from South Park has appeared in Family Guy, bringing his own resurrection mythology with him. This casual treatment of death isn't just a comedy device. It suggests that the characters exist in a reality where death is temporary or where multiple versions of the same character can exist simultaneously. Stewie has encountered alternate versions of himself and his family members from different timelines and dimensions. These aren't dreams or imagination sequences, but actual encounters with other versions of reality. The implications of this go far beyond simple comedy. If characters can die and return, if alternate versions of themselves exist in parallel dimensions, then the entire show might be taking place across multiple realities simultaneously. Each episode could be showing us events from different timelines or dimensions where slightly different versions of the characters exist. This would explain the show's inconsistent continuity and the way characters sometimes seem to forget major events from previous episodes. They're not forgetting, they're simply different versions of themselves who never experienced those events. The show isn't ignoring its own history. It's showing us glimpses of an infinite multiverse where every possible variation of the Griffin family's story plays out simultaneously. The religious and mythological elements in Family Guy also contribute to this deeper lore. The show has featured appearances by God, Jesus, the devil, and various other religious figures. These aren't parody versions, but actual supernatural entities who interact with the characters and influence events in Quahog. This suggests that the show's reality operates under a cosmology where divine and infernal forces are real and active. More intriguingly, these supernatural entities often seem to have specific interest in the Griffin family. God has personally intervened in their lives multiple times. Death himself has appeared as a character and formed relationships with family members. This level of cosmic attention suggests that the Griffins aren't just random people, but individuals who play important roles in some larger supernatural conflict or cosmic plan. The show's frequent use of cutaway gags might also be more than just random humor. These sequences often show Peter or other characters in completely different time periods, locations, or situations. What if these aren't imaginary scenarios, but glimpses of other realities where versions of these characters actually exist? The cutaway structure could be the show's way of revealing the multiverse that underlies its narrative. This interpretation would mean that every absurd cutaway gag is actually a window into an alternate dimension. Peter as a knight in medieval times isn't just a joke, it's a glimpse of a reality where a version of Peter actually lived during that era. The seemingly random nature of these sequences could be showing us how the barriers between dimensions occasionally thin, allowing characters to perceive events from parallel worlds. Cleveland Brown's spin-off show and eventual return to Family Guy takes on new significance in this context. His move to Virginia and subsequent return isn't just a narrative convenience, it's evidence of how characters can move between different versions of reality. The Cleveland show might have been showing us events from a dimension where Cleveland never moved back to Quahog, while his return to Family Guy represents a convergence of timelines. The relationship between Family Guy and other animated shows in the same universe adds another layer to this mythology. The Simpsons crossover episode wasn't just a marketing stunt. It was a demonstration that these shows exist in connected realities. Characters can travel between Springfield and Quahog because these locations exist in the same multiverse, just in different dimensional frequencies. As we dive deeper into the show's lore, we start to see patterns that suggest a hidden intelligence behind the chaos. The seemingly random events that plague the Griffin family might actually be tests or challenges designed by cosmic forces to determine their worthiness for some greater purpose. Stewie's advanced intelligence, Brian's existential awareness, Peter's reality-warping presence, and Lois's mysterious background could all be pieces of a larger puzzle. The show's self-aware humor and frequent breaking of the fourth wall might be characters occasionally becoming conscious of their true nature as beings in a constructed reality. When characters acknowledge that they're in a television show, they might be experiencing moments of cosmic awareness where they perceive the true nature of their existence. This brings us to perhaps the most mind-bending aspect of Family Guy's hidden lore. The show might be depicting the gradual awakening of its characters to their true nature as multidimensional beings trapped in a television narrative. Each season, the characters become slightly more aware of the absurdity of their situations and the arbitrary nature of the rules governing their reality. Stewie's evolution from would-be world conqueror to time-traveling adventurer represents his growing understanding of his cosmic nature. Brian's increasing cynicism and existential crises reflect his awareness that he's trapped between worlds. Peter's adventures become more outlandish because he's unconsciously pushing against the boundaries of his reality. Lois's hidden depths suggest she's always been aware of the truth, but has been protecting her family from it. The true horror and beauty of Family Guy's lore lies in this gradual revelation that nothing is as it seems. What appears to be random comedy is actually a complex meditation on the nature of reality, identity, and consciousness. The Griffin family's bizarre adventures are their unconscious attempts to break free from the limitations of their constructed world and discover their true nature as cosmic entities playing out an eternal story across infinite dimensions. So the next time you watch Family Guy, pay attention to the details that seem like throwaway gags. Notice how death has no permanent meaning, how reality bends around the characters, how they sometimes seem aware of forces beyond their comprehension. You're not just watching a comedy show. You're witnessing the gradual awakening of beings who are slowly discovering that they exist in a reality far stranger and more wonderful than they ever imagined. This is the true lore of Family Guy. Hidden beneath layers of crude humor and random cutaways, a story about consciousness trying to understand itself across multiple realities and infinite possibilities. Sweet dreams. Picture this. You're scrolling through endless videos trying to find something to help you drift off to sleep, and somehow you stumble across Family Guy lore. Sounds weird, right? But here's the thing that might surprise you. The chaotic world of the Griffin family actually contains some of the most bizarrely comforting storytelling patterns that work perfectly as background noise for sleep. Tonight, we're diving deep into the unexpected rabbit hole of Family Guy's hidden mythology, character backstories, and running gags that have been quietly building for over 2 decades. Trust me, by the end of this exploration, you'll understand why this animated chaos makes for surprisingly perfect sleep content. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. Family Guy isn't just random jokes thrown together. There's actually a complex web of continuity that runs through the entire series, creating this weird sense of familiarity that your brain craves when winding down. Think about it. Every episode follows certain predictable patterns. Peter does something stupid. Lois gets frustrated. Stewie plots world domination. Brian gets philosophical. Chris says something innocent yet profound, and Meg gets ignored. These patterns become almost meditative when you're not actively watching but just listening. The Griffin house itself has become this iconic location that feels more real than most TV homes. You know exactly where everything is. The living room with that brown couch facing the TV. The kitchen where most family arguments happen. Peter and Lois's bedroom where countless cutaway gags have originated. Stewie's room with all his advanced technology that somehow nobody questions. This geographical consistency creates a mental map that feels safe and familiar, exactly what your brain wants when transitioning to sleep. Now, let's talk about Peter Griffin's backstory, because it's way more elaborate than you might remember. Peter wasn't always the bumbling patriarch we know today. His childhood in Rhode Island shaped him in ways that the show has been slowly revealing for years. His relationship with his father, Mickey McFinnigan, later revealed to be Francis Griffin, created deep-seated issues around authority and approval that explained so much of his adult behavior. The revelation that Francis wasn't even his biological father added layers to Peter's identity crisis that runs throughout the series. Peter's various jobs throughout the show create this strange career timeline that somehow makes sense in the Family Guy universe. From his early days at the toy factory to his time at the brewery, each workplace became a setting for elaborate storylines and character development. His relationships with his co-workers like Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland formed the foundation of the show's secondary character network. These aren't just random neighbors. They're part of an intricate social ecosystem that's been developing since episode 1. Speaking of Joe Swanson, his backstory represents some of the show's most surprisingly deep storytelling. The details of how he became paralyzed have been explored multiple times, each revealing adding new layers to his character. His police career, his relationship with his wife Bonnie, and his struggles with his disability are handled with unexpected sensitivity for a show known for its controversial humor. Joe's friendship with Peter represents this weird masculine bond that transcends typical sitcom relationships. Glenn Quagmire might seem like a one-note character, but his history is incredibly complex. His career as a pilot isn't just a job setup for jokes. It's connected to his adventurous personality, his worldliness, and his complex relationship with commitment. The episodes exploring his relationship with his father, his various romantic entanglements, and his twisted psychology reveal a character struggling with deeper issues beneath the surface humor. His rivalry with Brian creates ongoing tension that drives multiple episode plots. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the show created this weird narrative gap that the writers have handled in interesting ways. His move to Stoolbend and eventual return to Quahog wasn't just a business decision. It was woven into the show's mythology in ways that acknowledge the real-world circumstances while maintaining fictional continuity. His relationship with his new wife Donna and his blended family created storylines that explored themes of second chances and family dynamics. Brian Griffin represents perhaps the show's most complex character development. He's not just a talking dog, he's a struggling writer, a recovering alcoholic, a liberal intellectual, and Peter's best friend, all wrapped into one character. His various romantic relationships, from his puppy love crushes to his serious adult relationships, have been explored with surprising depth. His death and resurrection created one of the show's most emotionally impactful storylines, proving that viewers had formed genuine emotional attachments to these characters. Brian's literary aspirations connect to larger themes about artistic struggle and unfulfilled potential that run throughout the series. His unfinished novel, his various writing projects, and his intellectual pretensions create this ongoing character arc about creativity and disappointment. His relationship with Stewie represents one of television's most unique friendships, transcending the typical pet owner dynamic to become something genuinely touching. Stewie Griffin's evolution from world-conquering villain to sexually confused genius baby represents one of the most significant character developments in animation history. His early episodes focused on elaborate schemes to kill Lois and take over the world. Gradually, the show revealed deeper layers to his personality, exploring his relationships, his sexuality, and his genuine affection for his family, despite his sinister exterior. The time travel episodes featuring Stewie and Brian created an entire subplot mythology that spans multiple seasons. Their adventures through different time periods aren't just random comedy sketches. They're connected stories that explore themes of friendship, consequence, and the nature of reality itself. These episodes often contain the show's most sophisticated storytelling and emotional moments. Lois Griffin's background as a member of the wealthy Pewterschmidt family adds class dynamics to the show that create ongoing storylines. Her relationship with her parents, particularly her disapproving father Carter, creates tension that drives multiple episode plots. Her past as a fighter pilot, her various career attempts, and her struggles with being married to Peter add complexity to what could have been a simple housewife character. The Pewterschmidt family wealth creates opportunities for episodes exploring economic disparity, social climbing, and family expectations. Lois's siblings and their various successes highlight Peter's failures, while also exploring themes about different paths to happiness and fulfillment. These family dynamics feel surprisingly realistic for a cartoon family. Chris Griffin might seem like the least developed Griffin family member, but his character has subtle depths that emerge over time. His artistic talents, his social struggles, and his innocent observations about adult world create moments of unexpected wisdom. His relationship with his father Peter explores themes about masculine expectations and parent-child communication that feel genuine despite the show's comedic framework. Meg Griffin's role as the family scapegoat has evolved into something more complex than simple abuse humor. Episodes exploring her internal life, her social struggles, and her occasional moments of strength reveal a character dealing with realistic teenage issues. Her relationship with her family, particularly her mother Lois, touches on themes about parental favoritism and sibling dynamics that many viewers can relate to. The show's supporting characters create this entire universe of interconnected relationships. Characters like Mayor West, Principal Shepard, Dr. Hartman, and the various shopkeepers and townspeople aren't just one-off joke characters. They're part of Quahog's social fabric, appearing consistently enough to create familiarity and continuity that makes the fictional town feel like a real place. The recurring villains, like Ernie the giant chicken, the greased-up deaf guy, and various one-episode antagonists, create ongoing storylines that span multiple seasons. These aren't just random encounters. They're part of Peter's personal mythology, representing different aspects of his character conflicts and growth. Family Guy's cutaway gags might seem random, but they actually follow certain patterns and themes that create consistency within the chaos. The historical references, the pop culture parodies, and the absurdist scenarios often connect to the main storyline in subtle ways, reinforcing character traits or episode themes through seemingly unrelated comedy bits. The show's approach to continuity is uniquely flexible, allowing for both strict adherence to character development and complete abandonment of logic when comedy demands it. This creates a viewing experience that feels both familiar and unpredictable, perfect for background listening where you can drift in and out without losing track of what's happening. The musical elements of Family Guy, from Conway Twitty appearances to elaborate song numbers, create rhythm and pacing that works well for sleep content. These musical interludes provide natural breaks in dialogue while maintaining the show's energy and entertainment value. The familiar melodies and recurring musical themes create audio comfort that helps with relaxation. The voice acting consistency across hundreds of episodes creates character familiarity that transcends individual storylines. Seth MacFarlane's multiple character voices, along with the consistent supporting cast, create audio comfort that works particularly well when you're not actively watching. These familiar voices become almost like friendly companions as you drift off to sleep. The show's treatment of holidays and special occasions has created annual traditions within the Family Guy universe. Christmas episodes, Halloween specials, and other holiday-themed stories create seasonal familiarity that connects to real-world calendar events while maintaining the show's unique comedic perspective. These special episodes often contain the series' most heartfelt moments alongside the typical humor. Family Guy's approach to social commentary, while often controversial, creates ongoing themes about American culture, politics, and social issues that give depth to what could be purely surface-level comedy. The show's willingness to tackle difficult subjects, even through its comedic lens, creates content that engages with real-world issues while maintaining entertainment value. The international episodes and travel storylines have created a broader world beyond Quahog, showing how the Griffin family dynamics work in different settings while maintaining character consistency. These episodes expand the show's mythology while reinforcing core character traits and relationships that define the series. As we wind down this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth noting how the show's longevity has created this massive tapestry of interconnected stories, character developments, and running gags that form a complete fictional universe. Whether you're using it as sleep content or just appreciating its complexity, Family Guy offers way more than surface-level entertainment. The familiar voices, predictable patterns, and comforting chaos create perfect background audio for relaxation. Sweet dreams. And remember, tomorrow there will always be more Family Guy lore to discover and explore in this wonderfully weird animated world that's been part of our cultural landscape for over 20 years. Have you ever wondered why a cartoon dog can talk but nobody questions it? Or why a baby genius plots world domination while his parents argue about mundane household problems? Family Guy might seem like random chaos on the surface, but buried beneath all those cutaway gags and pop culture references lies a surprisingly deep well of hidden lore that most fans have never discovered. Today we're diving into the secret backstories, deleted scenes, and creator revelations that completely change how you see the Griffin family forever. Before we start unraveling these mysteries, let me ask you something. How many times have you watched Family Guy and thought you caught every single joke? Well, prepare to have your mind blown, because what I'm about to share will make you want to rewatch every episode with completely fresh eyes. From the real reason Stewie's head is shaped the way it is, to the dark truth about why Brian walks on two legs, these aren't just fun facts. These are game-changing revelations that Seth MacFarlane and his team have been hiding in plain sight for over 2 decades. Let's start with something that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about the show's most iconic character. Stewie Griffin isn't just some random genius baby who happens to speak with a British accent. According to early production notes that surfaced years later, Seth MacFarlane originally conceived Stewie as having a specific psychological condition that explains both his advanced intelligence and his distinctive way of speaking. The creators deliberately designed his football-shaped head as a visual metaphor for the pressure building inside his developing brain, representing the conflict between his infant body and his mature mind. But here's where it gets really interesting. MacFarlane revealed in a rarely seen interview that Stewie's British accent isn't actually British at all. It's what's called a mid-Atlantic accent, the same affected speech pattern used by wealthy Americans in the early 20th century to sound more sophisticated. This detail wasn't chosen randomly. The creators wanted to show that even as a baby, Stewie is already performing a version of himself, putting on airs to match his intellectual superiority complex. Now, you might be thinking this is just creative interpretation, but wait until you hear about the episodes that never made it to air. There was an entire storyline planned for Season 3 that would have revealed Stewie's accent comes from his obsession with old Hollywood films that he watches late at night when the family is sleeping. The episode would have shown him mimicking Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn movies, explaining both his sophisticated vocabulary and his theatrical mannerisms. This backstory was ultimately scrapped because the writers felt it made Stewie too sympathetic and would have undermined his role as the show's primary antagonist. Speaking of characters with hidden depths, let's talk about Brian Griffin. Most people assume he's just a talking dog who drinks martinis and considers himself an intellectual. But the real lore behind Brian is much darker than you might expect. In the show's original pitch Bible, Brian wasn't always an anthropomorphic character. He started as a regular dog who gained human-like intelligence through a laboratory experiment gone wrong. This origin story was briefly referenced in early episodes through subtle visual cues that most viewers missed entirely. Remember how Brian occasionally displays knowledge about topics that would be impossible for a regular dog to understand? That's not just for comedic effect. The writers planted clues throughout the series, suggesting that Brian retains fragmented memories from his time as a test subject. His alcoholism isn't just a character quirk for adult humor. It's actually his way of coping with the psychological trauma of having his consciousness artificially altered. The constant drinking helps suppress the disturbing memories of his transformation, which is why he becomes increasingly anxious and neurotic when he's sober for extended periods. This connects to another piece of hidden lore that completely reframes Brian's relationship with the Griffin family. In deleted scenes from the pilot episode, there was supposed to be a moment where Brian accidentally reveals that he remembers being adopted by the Griffins, not born into the family. The implication was that Peter rescued Brian from the laboratory, not knowing about the experiments that had been performed on him. This would explain why Peter treats Brian more like an equal than a pet, and why the rest of the family accepts his human-like behavior without question. But the Brian revelations don't stop there. McFarlane once mentioned in a commentary track that Brian's literary aspirations aren't just pretentious posturing. They're actually his subconscious attempt to document his experiences and process his trauma through fiction. All those terrible novels he writes are supposedly coded accounts of his memories from before the experiments. The reason his writing is so bad isn't because he lacks talent. It's because he's trying to express experiences that his brain can't properly access or understand. Now let's shift gears and talk about Peter Griffin, because there's lore surrounding him that's been hiding in plain sight for years. You know how Peter has all these random jobs throughout the series and somehow always ends up in bizarre situations that no normal person would survive? There's actually a consistent explanation for this that the writers have been building since season 1. Peter isn't just lucky or cartoonishly resilient. According to production notes, he's supposed to represent the concept of the American dream taken to its most absurd extreme. Every job change, every wild adventure, every impossible survival is meant to show how someone with absolutely no qualifications or common sense can still stumble into success in America if they have enough confidence and persistence. But here's the twist that most fans miss. Peter's apparent stupidity isn't natural. It's a learned behavior that he developed as a defense mechanism against the crushing reality of adult responsibility. This theory is supported by episodes where Peter demonstrates surprising competence in specific situations, usually when his family is genuinely threatened. The writers intentionally show glimpses of a more capable Peter to suggest that his buffoonery is partially an act. He plays dumb because it allows him to avoid dealing with complex emotional situations and lets him shirk responsibility for his actions. It's actually a fairly sophisticated psychological portrait, disguised as slapstick comedy. The most mind-blowing piece of Peter lore involves his relationship with his father, Francis. In cutscenes from several episodes, there were supposed to be flashbacks showing that Peter's fear of authority and his rebellious nature stem from having an abusive father who constantly belittled his intelligence. Peter's current behavior is his way of rebelling against Francis even after his death, choosing to embrace stupidity as a form of posthumous defiance. This adds a tragic dimension to Peter's character that completely changes how you interpret his most outrageous moments. Let's move on to Lois, because her hidden backstory might be the most shocking of all. Most viewers see Lois as the long-suffering wife who somehow puts up with Peter's antics while trying to hold the family together. But there's lore suggesting that Lois is actually the most psychologically complex character in the entire show. Her wealthy background isn't just a plot device for occasional storylines about her family's money. It's the key to understanding her entire personality and motivation structure. According to early character development documents, Lois deliberately chose to marry Peter precisely because he was the opposite of everything her upper-class family expected from her. Her attraction to Peter wasn't romantic love in the traditional sense. It was her way of rebelling against the suffocating expectations of her privileged upbringing. This explains why she stays with Peter despite his obvious flaws and why she occasionally enables his worst behavior instead of putting her foot down. But here's where it gets really interesting. Lois's musical talents and her occasional displays of impressive competence aren't random character traits. They're remnants of the extensive education and training she received growing up in a wealthy family. The piano playing, the singing, the moments where she demonstrates sophisticated knowledge about art or culture, these are all parts of her original identity that she's trying to suppress in favor of her chosen role as a middle-class housewife. There was supposed to be an entire episode arc exploring Lois's internal conflict between her natural capabilities and her chosen lifestyle. The storyline would have revealed that she sometimes resents Peter not because he's difficult to live with, but because staying with him requires her to constantly diminish herself to avoid making him feel inadequate. This dynamic would have added incredible depth to their relationship and explained why their marriage has such a volatile quality. The Lois lore gets even deeper when you consider her relationship with her children. Her overprotectiveness of Meg isn't just maternal instinct. It's actually Lois projecting her own fears about conformity and social acceptance onto her daughter. Lois sees Meg struggling with the same issues she faced growing up, trying to fit in while dealing with family dynamics that set her apart from her peers. The reason Lois sometimes fails to defend Meg effectively is because she's reliving her own teenage trauma through her daughter's experiences. Now we need to talk about Meg, because there's lore surrounding her character that's both heartbreaking and brilliant. Everyone knows that Meg serves as the family scapegoat, constantly bullied and ignored by everyone around her. But according to Seth MacFarlane's original vision, Meg's role in the family isn't accidental. She's deliberately positioned as the emotional lightning rod that keeps the rest of the family functional. In early scripts, there were scenes showing that Meg is actually aware of her role as the family punching bag and has made a conscious decision to accept it because she understands that her family needs someone to blame for their problems. This makes Meg arguably the most mature and self-sacrificing member of the Griffin family, which completely reframes every joke made at her expense. The writers planted subtle clues throughout the series, suggesting that Meg has incredible inner strength and resilience that she hides from everyone around her. Her moments of competence and insight are deliberately rare because she's learned that showing her true capabilities threatens the family's emotional equilibrium. When Meg does stand up for herself, it usually creates chaos that ultimately gets resolved by her returning to her scapegoat role. There's also lore suggesting that Meg's unpopularity at school isn't entirely natural. Some episodes hint that she's unconsciously sabotaging her own social relationships because she's terrified of abandoning her family role. If Meg became popular and confident, she'd have to confront the fact that her family's treatment of her is abusive rather than merely unfortunate. It's easier for her to believe that she deserves the treatment she receives than to acknowledge that her family is fundamentally dysfunctional. The most devastating piece of Meg lore comes from deleted scenes, showing her keeping a secret journal where she documents all the cruel things her family says and does to her. But instead of expressing anger or hurt, the journal entries show Meg trying to understand and justify their behavior, constantly blaming herself for not being good enough to earn their love and respect. This transforms Meg from a simple comedy target into a genuinely tragic character whose story reflects real issues about family scapegoating and emotional abuse. Let's talk about some of the broader lore that affects the entire show's universe. Family Guy takes place in a world where cartoon logic applies, but there are consistent rules governing how that logic works. The cutaway gags aren't just random non sequiturs. They're actually windows into alternate realities or parallel dimensions that exist alongside the main Family Guy universe. This explains why the characters in cutaways sometimes have different personalities, or why historical events play out differently than in real life. Seth MacFarlane confirmed in interviews that he conceived the cutaway structure as a way to explore infinite possibilities within the show's framework. Each cutaway represents a potential timeline or alternative version of reality where different choices led to different outcomes. This means that every absurd scenario we see in a cutaway is actually happening somewhere in the broader Family Guy multiverse. This multiverse concept also explains some of the show's apparent continuity errors. When characters die and then reappear later, or when major events get reset without explanation, it's not sloppy writing. It's the show jumping between different dimensional versions of the Griffin family. The Brian death and resurrection storyline was actually a deliberate exploration of this concept, showing viewers what happens when the timeline gets significantly altered. There's also lore about Quahog itself that most viewers never notice. The town isn't just a generic setting for the Griffin family's adventures. It's specifically designed to represent a kind of American purgatory where nothing ever really changes or progresses. The residents of Quahog are stuck in perpetual cycles of the same mistakes and conflicts, which is why the characters can experience dramatic growth in one episode only, to return to their baseline personalities by the next episode. The writers have hidden references throughout the series, suggesting that Quahog exists in a temporal bubble where time moves differently than in the outside world. This explains why the characters never seem to age significantly, and why technological advancement happens inconsistently. It's not that the show ignores the passage of time. It's that Quahog itself is resistant to change, trapping its residents in an eternal present where growth and development are always temporary. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy's hidden lore, it's worth noting that much of this information comes from sources that aren't widely available to casual fans. Production notes, Deleted scenes, creator interviews, and behind-the-scenes materials reveal a level of thought and planning that's far more sophisticated than the show's reputation might suggest. Seth MacFarlane and his team have created a rich mythology that operates beneath the surface of what appears to be simple shock humor. The next time you watch Family Guy, pay attention to the details we've discussed today. Look for the subtle clues about character motivations, the hints about hidden backstories, and the consistent internal logic that governs even the most absurd situations. You'll discover that this apparently chaotic comedy actually follows carefully constructed rules that make every character more complex and interesting than they initially appear. What's most impressive about Family Guy's hidden lore is how it enhances rather than contradicts the show's comedic elements. Understanding Stewie's psychological complexity makes his schemes funnier, not less funny. Knowing about Brian's tragic backstory adds depth to his pretentious behavior without undermining the humor. Recognizing Meg's secret strength makes her mistreatment more poignant while still allowing the jokes to land. This is the mark of truly sophisticated comedy writing. The best humor comes from characters who feel real and situations that feel authentic, even when they're completely absurd. By building detailed backstories and consistent internal logic, the Family Guy writers created a foundation that supports both genuine emotional moments and outrageous comedic scenarios. So there you have it, the secret lore of Family Guy that changes everything about how you understand the show. From Stewie's artificial accent to Brian's laboratory origins, from Peter's defensive stupidity to Lois's suppressed identity, from Meg's conscious martyrdom to Quahog's temporal peculiarities. These hidden elements transform a seemingly simple cartoon into something much richer and more complex. Which of these revelations surprised you the most? Are there other aspects of Family Guy lore that you think deserve more attention? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice by Fox and nearly became lost media forever? Or that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? Welcome to the bizarre, twisted, and absolutely fascinating world of Family Guy lore that most fans have never heard about. I'm talking about secrets so wild that they make the show's most outrageous episodes look tame by comparison. We're diving deep into the creation myths, the behind-the-scenes drama, the near-death experiences, and the corporate battles that shaped one of television's most controversial animated series. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never watch Family Guy the same way again. Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Seth MacFarlane, the creator and voice of Peter Griffin, Brian, and Stewie, was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 1-1 on September 11th, 2001. That's right, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. But here's the crazy part. He overslept because he was hungover from a party the night before and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. If he had made that flight, Family Guy would never have existed beyond its first season, and animation history would be completely different. But that's just the beginning of this incredible story. Family Guy has one of the most bizarre resurrection tales in television history. The show premiered in 1999 and was actually performing decently in the ratings, but Fox kept moving it around to different time slots. You know how networks love to do that, right? Well, they moved it so many times that viewers couldn't keep track of when it was on. Eventually, Fox canceled it in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Here's where it gets interesting, though. While the show was dead on television, something magical was happening in the afterlife. Adult Swim picked up the syndication rights and started airing reruns late at night. College students and young adults discovered the show and fell in love with it. At the same time, DVD sales were going through the roof. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Fox did something almost unprecedented in television history. They brought back a canceled show based purely on DVD sales and cable reruns. Family Guy became the first show ever to be revived solely because of its success in syndication and home video. It was like watching a TV show literally rise from the dead. But the resurrection story gets even weirder. When Fox brought the show back, they didn't just order a few episodes to test the waters. They ordered 53 new episodes right off the bat. That's an enormous vote of confidence for a show that had already been canceled once. Seth MacFarlane suddenly went from unemployed animator to one of the most powerful people in Hollywood practically overnight. Now let's talk about the creative origins of the show, because they're absolutely fascinating. Seth MacFarlane created Family Guy when he was just 24 years old, fresh out of the Rhode Island School of Design. But here's what most people don't know. The show was originally pitched as a much more traditional family sitcom. The early concepts were way more grounded and realistic than what we ended up with. The character of Peter Griffin was originally going to be much more like a typical TV dad, still bumbling and overweight, but not the complete psychopath we know and love today. Stewie wasn't even going to be particularly smart or evil in the original concept. He was just going to be a regular baby with maybe slightly advanced vocabulary. Brian was going to be a normal dog who occasionally made witty observations but wasn't going to be a full conversation partner for the family. What changed everything was Seth MacFarlane's love of old Hollywood and classic animation. He grew up watching Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, and classic Disney cartoons, and he wanted to bring that level of visual comedy and surreal humor to primetime television. The problem was that most networks were terrified of anything too weird or experimental. Fox, however, was in a unique position in the late 90s. The Simpsons had proven that animated shows could work in prime time, but Fox was still considered the edgy, rebellious network. They were willing to take risks that ABC, CBS, and NBC would never consider. So when Seth pitched his cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island, Fox was intrigued enough to order a pilot. The pilot episode is actually incredibly different from the show we know today. The animation style was cruder, the jokes were more straightforward, and the characters hadn't yet developed their extreme personalities. If you watch that original pilot, you can barely recognize it as the same show. It's like looking at baby photos of a celebrity. You can kind of see the resemblance, but it's clearly a work in progress. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's development is how the characters evolved over time. Take Stewie, for example. In the early seasons, he was genuinely trying to kill Lois and take over the world. His evil schemes were the driving force behind many episodes. But as the show went on, the writers realized that Stewie was funnier when he was dealing with more relatable problems, like sexuality, relationships, and growing up. This evolution wasn't accidental. It reflected Seth MacFarlane's own growth as a writer and person. When he created Stewie, MacFarlane was a young, single guy who thought evil baby plots were hilarious. But as he got older and more experienced, he realized that character-driven comedy was more sustainable than pure shock value. The same thing happened with Brian. Originally, he was just the voice of reason in the Griffin household, the one sane character who could comment on everyone else's craziness. But over time, the writers started exploring Brian's flaws and insecurities, turning him into one of the most complex characters on television. His pretentiousness, his failed writing career, his drinking problem, all of these traits developed organically as the show matured. Speaking of character development, let's talk about some of the inspiration behind the Griffin family. Peter Griffin was actually based on a security guard that Seth MacFarlane worked with during a summer job. The guy was loud, obnoxious, and completely inappropriate, but somehow lovable at the same time. MacFarlane found himself fascinated by how someone could be so offensive, yet still maintain friendships and a family. Lois was inspired by MacFarlane's own mother, but also by the classic TV mom archetype. The twist was making her come from a wealthy family, which allowed the writers to explore themes of class and privilege. It also gave them an excuse to put the Griffins in situations they normally couldn't afford, like fancy parties and expensive vacations. The supporting characters have equally interesting origins. Glenn Quagmire was originally supposed to be a minor character who appeared in maybe 1 or 2 episodes, but Seth MacFarlane's voice performance was so distinctive and memorable that the writers kept bringing him back. The giggity giggity catchphrase wasn't even scripted. MacFarlane improvised it during recording, and everyone thought it was so funny that they made it Quagmire's signature sound. Cleveland Brown started as a simple background character, but MacFarlane realized that having a calm, reasonable neighbor made Peter's craziness even funnier by contrast. The character became so popular that he eventually got his own spin-off show, though that's a whole other story of corporate politics and creative struggles. One of the most controversial aspects of Family Guy is its use of cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that have nothing to do with the main plot. Some critics hate them, calling them lazy writing and cheap laughs. But here's the thing. Those cutaways were actually inspired by some of the most sophisticated comedy ever created. Seth MacFarlane grew up watching Monty Python's Flying Circus, and he was fascinated by how the Pythons would interrupt their sketches with completely random animations and non sequiturs. He also loved the Marx Brothers movies, where the plot would screech to a halt for a musical number or a bizarre comedy bit that had nothing to do with anything else. The cutaway gags serve a specific purpose in Family Guy's comedy structure. They allow the writers to do jokes that would be impossible within the constraints of a normal sitcom plot. Want to make fun of a celebrity or reference an obscure movie? Just have Peter say, "This reminds me of the time I," and cut to whatever crazy scenario you can imagine. But here's something most fans don't realize. Many of those cutaways are actually incredibly expensive to produce. Each one requires new character designs, new backgrounds, new voice acting, and sometimes even new music. A single 30-second cutaway can cost more to animate than an entire scene of regular dialogue. Fox executives were initially horrified by how much money the show was spending on these seemingly throwaway jokes. The financial aspect of Family Guy is actually one of the most interesting parts of its story. When the show first premiered, animation was still considered a niche market for adults. The Simpsons was successful, but it was seen as a unique exception rather than proof that there was a broader market for animated comedy. Family Guy's success helped prove that there was actually a huge appetite for adult animated shows. This paved the way for series like American Dad, The Cleveland Show, Archer, Rick and Morty, and countless others. Without Family Guy's commercial success, the entire landscape of adult animation might look completely different today. The merchandising aspect is equally fascinating. Family Guy products generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year. T-shirts, toys, video games, Christmas ornaments, you name it, and there's probably a Family Guy version of it. The Stewie character alone has spawned an entire industry of baby-themed merchandise with surprisingly dark humor. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of Family Guy's cultural impact is how it changed the way we think about offensive comedy. The show pushes boundaries that would have been unthinkable on television even 10 years before it premiered. Yet somehow, it manages to get away with jokes that would destroy other shows. The secret is in the show's self-awareness. Family Guy knows that it's offensive, and it's constantly making jokes about its own offensiveness. When Peter does something terrible, the other characters usually call him out on it. When the show makes a controversial reference, it often follows it up with a joke about how inappropriate the reference was. This meta-humor creates a kind of protective bubble around the show's more controversial content. Viewers understand that they're not supposed to take Peter Griffin seriously as a role model. He's clearly meant to be a cautionary tale about what happens when someone has no filter and no self-awareness. The voice acting on Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because it's honestly incredible. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 of the main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire, plus dozens of supporting characters and celebrity impersonations. His range is absolutely mind-blowing when you really think about it. But here's what's even more impressive. MacFarlane often records conversations between his own characters. That means he's essentially having entire dramatic scenes with himself, switching between voices and maintaining the emotional continuity of multiple characters simultaneously. It's like watching a one-man theater performance every time you see Peter and Brian have a heart-to-heart conversation. The other voice actors are equally talented. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, also does dozens of supporting characters, including the Griffins' maid Consuela. Mila Kunis took over the voice of Meg after the first season, and her performance evolved from simple teenager dialogue to some of the show's most emotionally complex moments. Seth Green voices Chris Griffin, and his portrayal perfectly captures that awkward teenage energy. Green actually ad-libs a lot of Chris's dialogue, particularly the character's weird sound effects and random observations. Many of Chris's funniest moments come from Green just improvising during recording sessions. The show's relationship with Fox has always been complicated and fascinating. On one hand, Family Guy makes enormous amounts of money for the network. On the other hand, it constantly creates controversy and pushes the boundaries of what's acceptable on broadcast television. There have been numerous instances where Fox executives have asked the writers to tone down certain jokes or storylines. Sometimes the writers comply, but often they find creative ways to work around the censorship. This has led to some incredibly clever wordplay and visual innuendo that's actually funnier than whatever the original joke was going to be. The international success of Family Guy is another interesting chapter in its story. The show airs in dozens of countries around the world, and each market has its own unique censorship challenges. Some countries cut entire scenes, while others dub over offensive dialogue with completely different jokes. In some markets, Stewie's sexuality is completely removed from his character arc. In others, references to religion or politics are heavily edited. This has created dozens of different versions of the show, each tailored to local sensitivities and cultural norms. Looking at Family Guy's legacy today, it's clear that the show fundamentally changed television comedy. It proved that audiences were hungry for more experimental, boundary-pushing content. It showed that animation could be a vehicle for sophisticated adult humor, not just children's entertainment. The show also pioneered many techniques that are now standard in comedy writing. The use of pop culture references as comedic shorthand, the mixing of high and low culture, the willingness to completely abandon plot for the sake of a good joke. These are all techniques that you can see in countless comedies today. But perhaps most importantly, Family Guy proved that television shows could have multiple lives. The fact that it survived cancellation and came back stronger than ever showed other creators that there were new paths to success beyond traditional network approval. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's worth noting that the show is still evolving and changing. Seth MacFarlane has stepped back from day-to-day involvement to focus on other projects, but the show continues under new leadership. Each season brings new controversies, new characters, and new ways to push the boundaries of what's possible on television. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has left an indelible mark on popular culture. It's a show that dared to be different, survived multiple attempts to kill it, and emerged as one of the most successful and influential comedies of the modern era. And honestly, that's pretty giggity if you ask me. Did you know that Family Guy was actually dead and buried for 3 entire years? And when it came back from the grave, it changed television forever in ways you probably never realized? Stick around because what I'm about to tell you about the hidden depths of Family Guy will completely change how you see this seemingly simple cartoon. Most people think Family Guy is just random jokes and cutaway gags. But there's a secret layer of storytelling, hidden references, and behind-the-scenes drama that would make your head spin. From secret government conspiracies to real-world tragedies that shaped entire episodes, this show has more dark secrets than you might imagine. Let's start with something that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but is absolutely true. Family Guy predicted major world events with scary accuracy. And I'm not talking about lucky guesses. We're talking about specific details that aired months or even years before they actually happened in real life. Remember the episode where Peter accidentally damages a bridge? That episode aired in 2005, showing a bridge collapse in remarkable detail. Less than 2 years later, the Minneapolis bridge collapse happened in almost identical circumstances. Coincidence? Maybe. But wait, there's more. The show also depicted airport security scenarios that became reality after major policy changes. Episodes showing specific security procedures aired before those exact procedures were implemented in real airports. Either Seth MacFarlane is a time traveler, or the writers were paying very close attention to patterns most people missed. But here's where it gets really weird. The show once depicted a very specific type of terrorist attack involving planes, and this aired before certain real-world events that I can't get too detailed about without this video getting demonetized. The point is, Family Guy wasn't just making random jokes about current events. They were somehow tapping into the collective unconscious of what was coming next. Now let's talk about the show's death and resurrection, because this story is wilder than any episode plot. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Fox executives thought it was done forever, but here's what they didn't expect. The DVD sales went absolutely insane. People were buying Family Guy DVDs like crazy, and more importantly, Adult Swim started running reruns that pulled in massive ratings. Fox realized they had made a huge mistake. The show wasn't just popular, it was building a cult following that was growing stronger every day it was off the air. When Family Guy came back in 2005, something had fundamentally changed. The writers knew they had been given a second chance, and they went absolutely wild with it. The humor got darker, the references got more obscure, and they started breaking the fourth wall in ways that no animated show had ever done before. But here's the part that most fans don't know. The cancellation and resurrection created a split personality within the show itself. There's pre-cancellation Family Guy and post-cancellation Family Guy, and they're almost like two different shows entirely. Pre-cancellation Family Guy was more grounded. Sure, it was weird, but the characters felt like real people with real problems. Post-cancellation Family Guy became something else entirely. It became a commentary on television itself, a show that was constantly aware it was a show. This shift created what television historians now call the meta-revolution. Family Guy showed other animated shows that you could break every rule, reference your own existence, and make fun of the very network that pays you and still be successful. South Park, Rick and Morty, and countless other shows followed this blueprint. Speaking of breaking rules, let's talk about the episodes that almost didn't make it to air. There's a whole vault of Family Guy content that was deemed too controversial, too dark, or too legally problematic to broadcast. Some of these episodes have become legendary among fans who have never seen them. One infamous episode dealt with a real-world tragedy in such a specific way that it would have caused massive backlash. The episode was fully animated, voiced, and scored, but it was pulled at the last minute. Only a handful of people have ever seen it, and they're bound by non-disclosure agreements. Another banned episode featured a storyline that involved real political figures in scenarios that would have caused international incidents. The legal department shut it down so hard that even mentioning specific details could result in lawsuits. But here's what's fascinating about these banned episodes. They show just how far Seth MacFarlane and his team were willing to push boundaries. They weren't just making a cartoon. They were conducting social experiments to see what society would tolerate. This brings us to one of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy lore, the show's relationship with censorship and standards. Every episode that makes it to air represents hundreds of battles fought behind the scenes between the writers and network executives. The writers developed an elaborate system for getting controversial content past the censors. They would intentionally include material they knew would be rejected, so that when they fought to keep the stuff they really wanted, it would seem reasonable by comparison. It's psychological warfare disguised as comedy writing. This strategy worked so well that other shows started copying it. The Family Guy approach to dealing with censorship became the industry standard for pushing boundaries on television. Now let's dive into the character origins, because the backstories of these characters are way darker and more complex than you'd expect from a comedy show. Peter Griffin wasn't always the lovable idiot we know today. In early concept art and scripts, he was genuinely disturbing, almost psychopathic in his behavior. The writers had to gradually soften Peter's character because test audiences found him genuinely unlikable. But traces of that original darker Peter still show up in certain episodes, creating this weird cognitive dissonance where you're laughing at someone who, if you really think about it, should probably be in prison. Stewie's character evolution is even more interesting. He was originally conceived as a pure villain, a baby bent on world domination with no redeeming qualities. But as the show progressed, the writers started exploring what would make a baby want to destroy everything, and they discovered something profound about childhood trauma and family dynamics. The gradual softening of Stewie from villain to complex character represents one of the most sophisticated character development arcs in television comedy. But it happened so slowly that most viewers didn't even notice it was happening. Brian's character might be the most tragic of all. He represents the writer's own struggles with depression, alcoholism, and the feeling of being trapped in a life that doesn't match your dreams. Every time Brian has an existential crisis, it's the writers working through their own psychological issues on screen. This is why Brian's temporary death hit fans so hard. It wasn't just killing off a character, it was the writers symbolically killing off the part of themselves that they saw in Brian. When they brought him back, it represented their own decision to keep fighting through depression and creative frustration. The show's relationship with its own success is another layer of complexity that most fans miss. Family Guy became so popular that it started influencing real-world culture, but this success created a feedback loop that began changing the show itself. References to Family Guy started showing up in other TV shows, movies, and even news broadcasts. Politicians started making Family Guy references in speeches. The show went from commenting on culture to actually shaping culture, and this shift is reflected in the later seasons. The writers became increasingly aware that they were creating cultural touchstones, and this awareness changed how they approached comedy. Jokes that might have been throwaway gags in early seasons became carefully crafted cultural commentary in later seasons. This evolution created what media scholars call the recursive effect, where a piece of media becomes so influential that it starts commenting on its own influence. Family Guy didn't just break the fourth wall. It demolished the entire theater. Let's talk about the real-world consequences of Family Guy's cultural impact. The show has been credited with changing how people communicate, particularly in how they use pop culture references in everyday conversation. Before Family Guy, pop culture references in conversation were usually recent and obvious. After Family Guy, people started making increasingly obscure references, creating entire conversations that were essentially elaborate chains of cultural callbacks. This changed how humor works in social situations. The show also influenced how other media uses cutaway gags and non sequiturs. Everything from commercials to political campaigns started using Family Guy-style random humor to grab attention and create memorable moments. But perhaps the most significant impact was on censorship standards across all media. Family Guy pushed boundaries so consistently and successfully that it expanded what was considered acceptable on television. Shows that came after could go places that wouldn't have been possible before Family Guy paved the way. The voice acting in Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because there are layers of performance art happening that most people completely miss. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice multiple characters. He creates distinct psychological profiles for each voice that reflect different aspects of his own personality. Peter represents 10. MacFarlane's id, his impulse-driven, consequence-ignoring side. Brian represents his superego, his intellectual, morally concerned side. Stewie represents his ego, his ambitious, attention-seeking side. The show is essentially one person having a conversation with different aspects of himself. This psychological complexity extends to the guest voices as well. When celebrities appear on Family Guy, they're not just doing celebrity cameos. They're being integrated into this complex psychological ecosystem that MacFarlane has created. The show's approach to celebrity culture is particularly sophisticated. Rather than just making fun of celebrities, Family Guy examines the psychological impact of fame on both celebrities and the people who consume celebrity culture. This brings us to one of the most overlooked aspects of Family Guy, its commentary on media consumption itself. The show constantly references other TV shows, movies, and cultural phenomena, but it's not just making references for the sake of references. Each reference serves as a commentary on how media shapes our understanding of reality. When Peter acts out scenes from movies, he's demonstrating how deeply fictional narratives penetrate real human behavior. When the show parodies other TV shows, it's examining how different formats and styles influence how we process information. The cutaway gags aren't random interruptions. They're demonstrations of how the human mind actually works. We don't think in linear narratives. We think in associations, tangents, and random connections. Family Guy mirrors the actual structure of human consciousness. This psychological accuracy is why the show resonates so deeply with audiences. It's not just funny, it's cognitively familiar. The chaos of Family Guy matches the chaos of our own internal mental experience. The show's treatment of social issues is another area where there's more depth than meets the eye. While Family Guy often appears to make jokes at the expense of sensitive topics, careful analysis reveals a more complex approach to social commentary. The show uses humor to make serious points more palatable, but it also uses humor to expose the absurdity of certain social attitudes. When characters make prejudiced statements, they're usually portrayed as idiotic or ignorant, effectively undermining the attitudes they're expressing. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics without preaching, but it also creates ambiguity about what the show actually believes. This ambiguity is intentional, forcing viewers to think critically about the issues being presented rather than passively accepting predetermined conclusions. As we wrap up this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth considering what this all means for the future of comedy in television. Family Guy didn't just entertain audiences, it fundamentally changed what television could be and do. The show proved that audiences were hungry for more complex, self-aware entertainment that challenged traditional narrative structures. It demonstrated that comedy could be a vehicle for serious psychological and social exploration without losing its entertainment value. Most importantly, Family Guy showed that taking creative risks, even when they result in cancellation, can ultimately lead to greater success than playing it safe. The show's death and resurrection became a template for how creative properties can find new life through changing audience behaviors and consumption patterns. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family. You're watching a sophisticated piece of media art that changed television forever, influenced how we communicate with each other, and continues to push boundaries in ways that most viewers never fully appreciate. The real genius of Family Guy isn't in any single joke or episode. It's in how it managed to hide all this complexity behind what appears to be simple, silly humor. That's the ultimate magic trick, and it's still working after all these years. Have you ever wondered what makes Family Guy the perfect show to fall asleep to? Tonight, we're diving deep into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog to uncover some fascinating facts that might just help you understand why millions of people drift off to this animated chaos every single night. But first, let me ask you something. What if I told you that the baby genius who plots world domination actually has one of the most tragic character arcs in television history? Or that there's a scientific reason why Peter Griffin's voice might be the ultimate sleep aid? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at your bedtime Family Guy marathon the same way again. Let's start with something that'll blow your mind. Stewie Griffin, that diabolical infant with the posh British accent, wasn't always the character we know today. In the original concept, he was supposed to be much darker and more sinister. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, initially envisioned him as a genuinely evil character whose plans would occasionally succeed. But here's the fascinating part that most fans don't realize. Stewie's entire personality is built on a foundation of insecurity and loneliness that makes him oddly relatable, especially during those late-night viewing sessions when you're feeling a bit isolated yourself. The genius baby's accent tells us everything we need to know about human psychology. In one of the show's most revealing moments, Stewie admits in therapy that his British accent is completely fake. He adopted it to sound smarter and more sophisticated than everyone around him. It's essentially vocal armor designed to protect his vulnerable core. This resonates with so many viewers because we all put on masks to hide our insecurities. When you're lying in bed at 3 in the morning, there's something comforting about a character who's also struggling with authenticity. But here's where it gets really interesting. The show deliberately keeps it ambiguous whether other characters can actually understand Stewie. Sometimes they respond to him. Sometimes they completely ignore his elaborate monologues about world domination. This creates a dreamlike quality that perfectly mirrors the state between waking and sleeping. Your brain doesn't have to work too hard to follow rigid logic because the show itself operates on dream logic. Speaking of dream logic, let's talk about the show's relationship with time and reality. Family Guy is famous for its cutaway gags that transport viewers to completely different scenarios mid-episode. One moment Peter is arguing with Lois about dinner. The next moment we're watching a historical flashback about Napoleon's bathroom habits. These rapid shifts in context actually mimic the way our minds work when we're falling asleep, jumping from thought to thought without linear connection. The show's approach to continuity is another sleep-inducing factor. Characters die and come back to life, major events get completely forgotten by the next episode, and the family somehow never ages despite running for over 2 decades. This lack of consequences creates a safe space for your mind. You don't need to worry about emotional investment or following complex storylines. It's mental comfort food. Now let's examine the voice acting, because this is where the science gets really interesting. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, including Peter, Brian, and Stewie. The consistency of hearing the same vocal patterns creates a subconscious sense of familiarity and safety. Peter's voice in particular has a rhythmic, almost hypnotic quality that many sleep specialists would recognize as naturally soothing. The slight nasal tone and steady pacing can actually help regulate breathing patterns. Brian Griffin represents something unique in the Family Guy universe. As the talking dog who serves as the show's voice of reason, he often delivers philosophical observations and cultural commentary. But here's what makes him perfect for sleep viewing. His conversations with Stewie frequently dive into existential topics without becoming too heavy or anxiety-provoking. They discuss the meaning of life, mortality, and purpose in ways that feel profound but never overwhelming. It's like having a gentle philosophical discussion as you drift off to sleep. The show's approach to controversial topics is surprisingly sophisticated when you analyze it from a sleep psychology perspective. While Family Guy is known for pushing boundaries, it does so in such an over-the-top way that it becomes almost cartoonish rather than genuinely disturbing. This allows viewers to process difficult subjects without the emotional intensity that would keep them awake. It's social commentary wrapped in enough absurdity to feel safe. Let's dive into the Griffin family dynamics, because they reveal something fascinating about comfort viewing. Despite all their dysfunction, the family always comes back together by the end of each episode. Peter might do something incredibly stupid. Lois might lose her temper. Meg might face another humiliation, but they remain a unit. This predictable structure provides emotional security. No matter how chaotic things get, you know everything will essentially reset by the next episode. The show's treatment of Meg Griffin deserves special attention. As the perpetually misunderstood teenager who faces constant rejection and ridicule, she represents the part of ourselves we're most insecure about. But the show's portrayal of her suffering is so exaggerated that it becomes therapeutic rather than depressing. It's like having your own adolescent anxieties reflected back to you in such an extreme way that they lose their power to hurt you. Chris Griffin, the dim-witted but kind-hearted son, provides another layer of comfort. His innocence and genuine sweetness create moments of unexpected warmth throughout the show. When everything else is cynical and sarcastic, Chris offers glimpses of pure, uncomplicated emotion. These moments work like pressure valves, releasing tension just when the cynicism might become overwhelming. The show's relationship with pop culture creates a unique viewing experience that's perfect for repeat watching. The references span decades, from obscure 70s television shows to current internet memes. This means different jokes land differently depending on your age, mood, and current knowledge base. You can watch the same episode multiple times and discover new layers, but the discovery process is gentle and rewarding rather than demanding. Family Guy's animation style contributes to its sleep friendliness in subtle but important ways. The character designs are simple and rounded, avoiding sharp angles or jarring visual elements that might startle viewers. The color palette is warm and familiar, dominated by the cozy yellows and browns of the Griffin home. Even during action sequences or fantastical cutaways, the visual style remains consistent and non-threatening. The show's musical elements deserve recognition too. From Stewie and Brian's elaborate musical numbers to Peter's improvised songs, music is woven throughout the series in ways that create rhythm and flow. These musical interludes often serve as natural breaking points, giving your brain permission to zone out or drift away. The songs are catchy enough to be memorable, but rarely complex enough to demand active listening. One of the most brilliant aspects of Family Guy's sleep appeal is its relationship with repetition. The show has been running for so long that certain gags and character interactions have become ritualistic. Peter fighting the giant chicken, Stewie's elaborate revenge plots against Lois, Brian's pretentious literary aspirations. These recurring elements create a sense of familiarity that can be deeply comforting for regular viewers. The show's approach to violence is another key factor. While there's plenty of cartoon violence, it's always presented in such an unrealistic way that it never feels genuinely threatening. Characters get blown up, shot, crushed, and dismembered, only to appear completely fine in the next scene. This consequence-free violence allows viewers to experience excitement and tension without any lasting anxiety. Let's talk about the show's treatment of mortality. because this might be the most important element for sleep viewing. Death appears frequently in Family Guy, but it's always treated as either temporary or comedic rather than genuinely tragic. Characters die and return, discuss death casually, and face mortal peril without real consequences. For viewers dealing with their own mortality anxieties, especially late at night, this approach can be surprisingly therapeutic. The writing style of Family Guy creates a unique rhythm that mirrors natural sleep patterns. Episodes often start with high-energy scenarios that gradually wind down through various subplots and cutaways. By the time you reach the resolution, the pacing has naturally slowed, making it easier to transition into actual sleep. It's like the show is designed to help you power down. Family Guy's relationship with nostalgia is complex and comforting. The show constantly references and parodies elements from decades past, creating a sense of collective cultural memory. Whether it's a reference to an 80s movie, a 70s television show, or a 90s commercial, these callbacks create connections to simpler times. For many viewers, this nostalgic element provides emotional comfort that eases the transition to sleep. The show's approach to relationships and romance offers another layer of sleep-friendly content. Despite all the dysfunction and crude humor, there are genuine moments of love and connection between characters. Peter and Lois, despite their constant conflicts, clearly love each other. Stewie and Brian, despite their differences, have formed an everyday, unlikely but deep friendship. These relationship dynamics provide emotional warmth without demanding too much investment. Here's something most people don't realize about Family Guy's structure. The show operates on multiple levels of engagement. You can watch it as pure background noise, letting the familiar voices and music wash over you. You can engage with the surface-level humor and sight gags. Or you can dive deep into the cultural references and character development. This flexibility makes it perfect for different stages of falling asleep. The show's treatment of everyday situations is particularly sleep-friendly. Many episodes revolve around mundane domestic issues like household chores, neighbor disputes, or family dinners that somehow spiral into elaborate adventures. But no matter how wild things get, they always return to the familiar setting of the Griffin home. This creates a sense of adventure within safety, excitement within security. Family Guy's approach to current events and social issues provides another comfort layer. The show comments on politics, social trends, and cultural phenomena, but always through the lens of cartoon absurdity. This allows viewers to engage with real-world concerns without the anxiety that usually accompanies such topics. It's like having a pressure release valve for contemporary stress. The show's episodic nature means you never have to worry about missing crucial plot developments if you fall asleep mid-episode. While there are occasionally multi-part episodes or recurring storylines, the vast majority of episodes are self-contained. This removes the anxiety about keeping up with complex narratives and allows your mind to relax completely. As we wrap up this deep dive into why Family Guy has become the ultimate sleep companion for millions of viewers, remember that comfort viewing is a deeply personal experience. What works for one person might not work for another, but there's something undeniably special about a show that can make you laugh, think, and ultimately feel at peace, all within the span of 22 minutes. The genius of Family Guy as a sleep aid lies in its perfect balance of engagement and relaxation. It's stimulating enough to occupy your conscious mind and prevent anxious thoughts from taking over, but familiar and comforting enough to allow your subconscious to begin the journey towards sleep. Whether you're drawn to Stewie's elaborate schemes, Peter's childlike wonder, or Brian's philosophical musings, there's something in this animated chaos for everyone. So the next time you find yourself reaching for that remote at bedtime, remember that you're not just choosing mindless entertainment. You're selecting a carefully crafted comfort blanket that's helped millions of people transition from the stresses of the day into peaceful rest. Sweet dreams, and remember, in Quahog, everything always works out in the end. Picture this. It's 2 a.m. You're tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Your mind is racing with thoughts about tomorrow's responsibilities, that awkward conversation from 3 weeks ago, and whether you left the stove on. What you need isn't another meditation app or white noise machine. You need something perfectly mundane, yet oddly fascinating. You need random Family Guy facts that will occupy just enough of your brain to let sleep creep in without being so exciting that they keep you awake. Tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog, with facts so specific and delightfully pointless that they'll have you drifting off faster than Peter Griffin at a feminist poetry reading. Let's start with something that sounds completely made up but is absolutely real. The chicken fights between Peter Griffin and Ernie the Giant Chicken have collectively lasted over 20 minutes of screen time across all episodes. 20 minutes. That's longer than most sitcom episodes dedicate to their main plot. These epic battles began over something so ridiculously petty that it perfectly encapsulates the show's absurdist humor. An expired coupon. Not a life-changing amount of money, not a family heirloom, but a piece of paper that saves you maybe 50 cents on chicken feed. Yet this trivial dispute has spawned some of the most elaborate and destructive fight sequences in television history. The creators didn't plan for these fights to become a recurring element. The first chicken fight was supposed to be a one-off gag, but audience response was so positive that it became a signature element of the show. Each subsequent battle had to top the previous one in terms of scope and destruction. They've fought in the streets, crashed through buildings, battled in the sky, and even taken their conflict underwater. The animators spend weeks choreographing these sequences, treating them with the same attention to detail that major studios reserve for blockbuster action films. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Every episode of Family Guy requires approximately 15,000 individual drawings. In the digital age, this seems almost quaint, but the show maintains a hand-drawn aesthetic that demands incredible attention to detail. Each character's movement, each facial expression, each background element starts as a pencil sketch. The animators have developed shortcuts and techniques over the years, but the fundamental process remains surprisingly labor-intensive. The voice actors record their lines before any animation begins, which means the animators have to match the drawings to the vocal performances rather than the other way around. This creates some interesting challenges. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, and he often has conversations with himself during recording sessions. The sound engineers have become experts at seamlessly blending these multi-character performances, creating the illusion that Peter, Brian, and Stewie are actually in the same room talking to each other. Speaking of voices, here's a fact that demonstrates just how integral Seth MacFarlane is to the show's DNA. He voices 4 main characters, plus dozens of recurring characters and one-off personalities. When he temporarily stepped back from the show to focus on other projects, the producers seriously considered ending Family Guy rather than recasting his roles. They eventually found ways to work around his reduced availability, but it highlighted how deeply connected the show is to MacFarlane's specific vocal talents and comedic sensibilities. The show's relationship with censorship has produced some genuinely bizarre situations over the years. There are jokes that were cut from the television broadcast but restored for DVD releases, creating alternate versions of episodes that exist in different formats. Some episodes have different running times, depending on where and how you watch them. The censors have made requests that seem arbitrary to outside observers. Violence is often acceptable, but certain types of language or visual gags get flagged for removal. This has led to some creative workarounds by the writing team. They've developed a sort of code for getting controversial material past the censors. Sometimes they'll include an extremely offensive joke that they know will be rejected, making their actually intended joke seem mild by comparison. It's a psychological negotiation tactic that has become part of their standard writing process. Here's something that sounds like trivia, but actually reveals something profound about how the show is made. The writer's room keeps a collection of rejected joke ideas that they call the too weird pile. These aren't jokes that are too offensive or inappropriate, but rather concepts that are so strange or specific that they don't fit into any episode. Occasionally, they'll build an entire storyline around one of these orphaned ideas, which explains why some episodes feel like fever dreams that shouldn't work but somehow do. The show's approach to celebrity cameos is more strategic than it might appear. When famous people appear as themselves, they're usually playing exaggerated versions of their public personas rather than trying to seem likable or relatable. The writers deliberately lean into whatever characteristic or controversy that celebrity is known for, creating appearances that feel more like roasts than typical guest spots. This approach has occasionally caused problems when celebrities change their minds about how they want to be portrayed, leading to last-minute script changes or even canceled episodes. Family Guy's relationship with its own continuity is fascinatingly inconsistent. The writers will sometimes reference events from episodes that aired years earlier, demonstrating that they do pay attention to their own history. But they'll just as often completely ignore or contradict previously established facts about the characters or their world. This isn't laziness or poor planning, but rather a deliberate choice to prioritize individual episode quality over series-long consistency. The animation team has developed a visual shorthand for different types of scenes that regular viewers might not consciously notice but definitely feel. Flashback sequences use slightly different color palettes and animation techniques. Dream sequences have their own visual language. Even the way characters move changes depending on whether a scene is meant to be realistic or cartoonish within the show's already cartoonish world. Here's a production detail that reveals how much thought goes into seemingly throwaway moments. Background characters and crowd scenes aren't just randomly generated. The animators create specific individuals with their own implied backstories, even though these characters might only appear for a few seconds. They've developed a whole population of Quahog residents who appear in multiple episodes, creating an illusion of a lived-in community, even though most viewers would never consciously recognize these recurring background players. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production pipeline from regular episodes. They start with Seth MacFarlane or other musically inclined staff members creating rough recordings of the songs. Then professional arrangers develop full orchestrations. The voice actors record their vocals to these arrangements. Only after all the music is complete do the animators begin creating visuals to match. This process can take months for a single musical sequence, which explains why these segments often feel more polished and elaborate than the surrounding episode. Family Guy's approach to holiday episodes reveals something interesting about how the writers view their own show. They treat holiday specials as opportunities to experiment with different formats or storytelling techniques. Rather than simply plugging their characters into traditional holiday scenarios, Christmas episodes might be musicals, Halloween episodes might be horror parodies, and so on. This keeps the show from falling into the predictable patterns that plague many long-running series. The show's merchandise presents some unique challenges because of how the characters are designed. Peter Griffin's proportions don't translate well to three-dimensional objects, leading to action figures and toys that look subtly wrong. The merchandising team has had to develop modified character designs specifically for products, creating versions of the characters that maintain their essential appearance while being more practically manufacturable. Here's something that demonstrates the show's attention to detail in unexpected areas. The writers have created complete backstories for characters who have never appeared on screen. They know the names and personalities of Brian's parents, even though this information has never been relevant to any episode. They've developed detailed histories for minor recurring characters that extend far beyond anything that's ever been shown. This background work helps maintain consistency in how these characters behave, even when they're only making brief appearances. The show's relationship with its own spin-offs created some interesting continuity challenges. When the Cleveland show was in production, storylines had to be coordinated between writing teams to ensure that Cleveland's appearances on Family Guy didn't contradict what was happening on his own show. This led to some awkward scheduling situations where episodes had to be rewritten or delayed to maintain consistency across both series. Family Guy's approach to celebrity deaths has evolved over the years in response to changing cultural sensitivities. Early episodes would sometimes include jokes about recently deceased public figures, but the writers now generally avoid this territory. Unless enough time has passed for such references to feel like historical commentary rather than current events humor. This self-imposed guideline has prevented some potentially awkward situations where episodes would have aired shortly after unexpected celebrity deaths. The show's animators have developed specialized techniques for different types of scenes that regular viewers probably don't notice but contribute to the overall viewing experience. Fight scenes use different frame rates and animation principles than dialogue scenes. Fantasy sequences might employ completely different artistic styles. The animators treat each type of scene as requiring its own approach, making Family Guy more visually diverse than many people realize. Here's a fact that illustrates how deeply the show has embedded itself in popular culture. The writers receive hundreds of suggestions from fans every week, ranging from episode ideas to character suggestions to complaints about plot inconsistencies. While they can't use fan-submitted ideas for legal reasons, these communications help them understand how their audience perceives the show and what elements are most popular or problematic. The show's approach to social media and internet culture has changed dramatically over its run. Early episodes barely acknowledged the existence of the internet, while recent seasons treat social media and online culture as fundamental aspects of modern life. The writers have had to learn new forms of humor and reference that didn't exist when the show began, essentially evolving their comedy style to match changing technology and communication patterns. Family Guy's international versions present fascinating translation challenges. Jokes that rely on American cultural references or wordplay often can't be directly translated, leading to completely different jokes in dubbed versions. Some countries have created culturally specific versions of certain episodes, replacing American references with local equivalents. This has resulted in versions of Family Guy that are almost entirely different shows while maintaining the same basic characters and plot lines. The show's writers maintain detailed style guides that specify how each character speaks, what types of references they would make, and how they would react in different situations. These guides help maintain consistency across different writers and ensure that characters don't drift too far from their established personalities. Brian's dialogue, for example, follows specific patterns that reflect his pretentious intellectual aspirations, while Chris's speech patterns reflect his slower mental processing speed. Here's something that reveals the show's commitment to its own absurdist logic. The writers have created internal rules for how the show's universe works that they follow even when these rules are never explicitly stated. They know how long it takes to travel between different locations in Quahog, which characters know each other, and what each character's financial situation is like. This background consistency helps ground even the most ridiculous storylines in something resembling reality. The show's merchandise licensing deals have created some genuinely strange products over the years. There have been Family Guy-themed everything from breakfast cereals to car accessories to wedding decorations. The licensing team has to consider whether each potential product fits with the show's brand, leading to some philosophical discussions about what Family Guy represents as a cultural entity beyond just a television program. Family Guy's approach to controversial topics has become more sophisticated over the years, moving from simple shock value toward more nuanced satirical commentary. The writers now spend considerable time researching topics before writing about them, ensuring that their jokes come from a place of understanding rather than ignorance. This doesn't mean they avoid controversial subjects, but rather that they approach them with more intentionality. The show's animators have developed a visual signature that makes Family Guy immediately recognizable, even in brief clips or promotional materials. This involves not just character design but also choices about color palettes, camera angles, and motion principles. New animators joining the team have to learn these specific techniques to ensure visual consistency across different episodes and seasons. Here's a production detail that most viewers would never think about, but significantly impacts the viewing experience. The show's sound design team creates distinct audio signatures for different characters and locations. Peter's footsteps sound different from Brian's. The Griffin house has its own acoustic characteristics, and even the way doors close varies depending on the context. These subtle audio cues help create the illusion of a consistent physical world, even though everything is animated. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are drawing the next batch of Family Guy episodes, voice actors are recording dialogue for situations that don't exist, and writers are debating whether jokes about topics you've never considered are funny enough to include in a television show. The machinery of entertainment continues turning even while you rest, creating the content that will occupy your mind during tomorrow night's journey toward sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember that in the grand scheme of things, we're all just characters in someone else's animated universe, trying to make sense of the absurd situations we find ourselves in.